In this edition of FSW Conversations, we are talking to Tom Marchant, the co-founder of Black Tomato, a luxury travel company renowned for its bespoke, boundary-pushing experiences tailored to global luxury travelers. With a deep passion for adventure and innovation, Tom is working to redefine modern luxury travel, creating memorable journeys that inspire curiosity and connection. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. I would love for you just to start by telling us about your background and the journey that led you to found Black Tomato.
Sure. Firstly, thanks very much for having me on, Jessica. It's really great to be chatting. Yeah, in terms of background starting this, I grew up the son of an entrepreneur. So observing my father as he built his business and the relative sort of highs and lows at times that came with it, just planted a seed that I really wanted to do my own thing. And as a son of both my father and a mother who's from Finland, I spent a lot of my youth traveling and seeing a lot of the world, and was just always from a very early age very curious about the world and the joy that travel could bring you. I was then at college and met one of my co-founders, James Merritt, who had a similar outlook on life and travel. And again, his father was an entrepreneur too. And so when we were at college, we would often talk about, wouldn't it be great to do our own thing one day, without any idea what that would be. So after college, we were both traveling, took jobs in different places. The jobs I took, this was just to earn some money to go traveling, but I ended up working in Russia and South Africa for a company whilst I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do. Then came back from that and took a job at Ernst& Young, not because I necessarily wanted to go and work in the corporate financial world, but just wanted to do something for a while whilst the idea that was going to become Black Tomato was being worked on. So myself and James both had these corporate jobs, but would meet regularly to discuss what this business, whatever it was going to be. When we had been traveling, we'd been all over the world together. But when we were about 21, we were on a trip in Brazil, in the Pantanal, a remote part of Brazil. And we spent this incredible week adventuring through jungles and swamps and the like. And I remember it was just one night we were sat there after this incredible day saying, yeah, these experiences are so unique. This is what we want to be doing. And how could we keep doing this? But also perhaps introduce this to other people, because even though we were young and not necessarily spending our whole lives in a luxury world, we just thought we couldn't really think of a company, even back then in the UK, who was approaching travel in the way we were talking about it. So moving forward, we then were in Australia, met our other co-founder there who had a similar view on life, came back to London, worked on these jobs, but all the while we're refining what was going to become Black Tomato. About 3 or 4 years into those jobs, we started Black Tomato. It was, as all startups are, bootstrapped, and we needed to get it right quite quickly. We weren't sat on a big treasure chest of investment that could allow us to play around with things and see if it could work. Our belief was that having had some years of experience in the industry, if things didn't go right, because it often happens in startups, we could go back to those jobs. But we were lucky that when we started, the approach we took, which was very much about creating travel experiences driven by emotion and the need to fulfill these emotional needs when you travel, really struck a chord. Back in those days, the word experience in terms of travel experiences was not nearly as ubiquitous as it is today. So our approach to talking about firstly how you would want to feel when you travel or what you were going to experience, as opposed to simply presenting a long list of destinations and things you could do, was seen as being quite different. And it gave us cut through, and quite quickly we started getting press pickup in lots of influential publishing titles, so the likes of Condé Nast to Hearst. And those were the things that really started putting us on the map of the luxury consumer, who thought that these were a bunch of guys with an interesting take on travel, trying to approach it in a way that perhaps conventional travel companies weren't doing it, and also spoke to people like them. So I think that was the gap we saw. We looked around the competitive landscape and said, whilst there were many and still are really fantastic companies creating travel experiences, no one was really connecting to the consumer with a tone of voice and a level of empathy that said, we understand how you want to feel and we know how we can create those feelings for you. So that was a sort of a very brief but potted history of how we came to be who we are.
And I think so much of where you guys come in is I feel like almost you've flipped luxury travel on its head and made it about the experience and the sort of adventure of being there. And so much of travel is just point, click, book, then you go. What is your sort of sense of the standard of luxury travel these days? And how do you guys try to differentiate that?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think this word, what is luxury, is so often asked and so often redefined. And I think it's also quite a personal thing. I think the things that have been almost like the constant for us when we talk about luxury are things that feel that there's real thought has gone into it. That I think customers, when they're looking for something that's classed as luxurious, like to know that they, as an individual, are being thought about, and something that is being created is really for them. And often what comes with that feeling of something being for them is something that therefore is quite unique is rare, and it's providing an opportunity to feel or see or experience something in a way that few others have. I mean, and that it parlays into lots of other kind of luxury offerings. You think about it, whether it's bespoke tailoring or certain types of handbags or watches, things that feel are that they are unique or have been crafted with a specific person in mind. And I think those are the things that still continue. So when we look at our experiences, and they're a broad range, it's what is unique about it, but where are we demonstrating that we're really thinking about the consumer in this? And that also therefore throws up lots of different types of experiences that still fall under that moniker of being luxury. I think a lot of people used to, perhaps less so these days, would associate luxury with simply gold taps, 24-hour butler service, and these types of places and high thread counts on the sheets. But whilst there is a role for that, equally, when we started the company, as an example, we discovered this experience in Iceland where you could go and scuba dive or snorkel between tectonic plates. So literally you could have this experience of, I'm air quoting here, but like holding the world apart. You could have one hand on the Eurasian plate, one hand on the Americana plate. And the cost of that was like about 90 euros to do. But the uniqueness of it and the insight to be able to create, that was something that felt luxurious and was a luxury. I often talk about you could spend $20,000 on a suite, in a certain hotel, but you could equally spend $20,000 on setting up a bespoke camp deep in the Mongolian steppe, a very different experience in terms of, say, where you're laying your head for the night, but a totally unique and almost more luxurious experience because you're going to be one of very few people who's ever had that experience, and it's particularly to you. So yeah, there's a wide spectrum of what you can call luxury, and all of it justifiable, I think. But within our world, it is about this thoughtfulness that then flows into things that feel unique and particular to the end client.
I love that so much, and my husband keeps threatening to make me do the between the continents thing. I'm deathly afraid of water, and that's, like, on his bucket list.
I've done it plenty of times though. I go to Iceland all the time, but it still marvels in the way that it did the first time I did it, actually. And those are the things that bring me real joy when we're going out and creating these kind of experiences.
So much of what you say in terms of that definition of luxury being in the experience and that sort of emotional connection it resonates, I think, with so many people, because I feel like social media and everything has made luxury a bit, I don't want to say middle of the road, but we associate it with objects and a price range rather than with sort of the quality of the experience.
And it's weird because I've read or thought often about what's almost like this commoditization of luxury. And that's not to say that I don't think everyone should be able to access it. I think that's a great thing. But actually what often is seen as being luxury, it doesn't have to be defined by price point, but it's about the particularity of it. And yet when you see things are blasted out there and everyone's doing it, or if everyone has this money, they can do it. In some ways, for me, it detracts a little bit because it doesn't perhaps feel as special. But again, it's a very individual preference point. But you're right. I think the spread of this stuff on social media, I think it's inevitable that after a while it almost desensitizes people to certain things because it's just like, well, I see it everywhere. Everyone has it. I mean, not everyone has it, but so many people have it that it starts eroding that sense of a uniqueness or how relevant and particular it is to you.
I'm in the middle of writing a whole book on luxury content strategy, and we actually take basically all the practices of enterprise content strategy and apply it to physical space as well. We do digital physical, and I have this whole kind of theory that if you start treating experiences like quality content and start, focusing on things like curation strategy and focusing on personalization in terms of really attuning what you're talking about and what you're doing to the audiences you're delivering it to, then you start to return to the essence of better service, better kind of customer experience, and that sort of emotional connection with people. And I feel like so much of that commoditization you're talking about is the separation between sort of the stuff and the feeling of it.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, when we often we talk about what we do, yes, there's the places you go to and the places you can stay and things you can do, but it has to be wrapped in this level of service and understanding and thoughtfulness that is almost like what elevates you or sets you apart. Because you often see with just in travel with lots of places, if everyone can just sell the same thing, even if it's at a crazy price point, it almost like just starts making it all feel the same. And so it's where we're always saying, where is the value that we are truly adding? And yes, it's in the curation and it's the insight and the access, but the whole service that you wrap around it. And then it's about telling those stories through our content strategies and the way we're communicating. And I think we do it pretty well, but we always come back to that. It's the feedback we have from our customers or the things we're creating. It's always comes back down to kind of how we created this feeling within them. And so much of that is more than just simply just stay in this place or just look at that place. It has to be. And I think sometimes within the luxury space, I think a lot of people miss that. And then when you hear people, you talk about people going to jewelry stores, I know that the jewelry brands that people love going into because how they're looked after when they go into that store, almost more so they're actually what they're then wearing on their body. And that's where I think there's great opportunity to reinforce your brand or build further brand equity from that. So yeah, I think certainly in travel, often have to remind people it is a service business, but service in the best possible way, not as being this purely just deferential, but it's about how can we bring joy to people at all parts of that customer journey, very from the first time they get in touch with us, but to when they're there and then when they're back. And those are great opportunities, not just to impress there, but to drive loyalty, drive referral, win more. It's those details and moments that people remember and that don't quite future proof it, but it just gives you more confidence that they'll be coming back or telling other people about it, which is crucial for business continuity and growth.
You're building memories, right? You're building that sort of magic. Just to dive into sort of your process more, because one of the things that I think is very unique about you is just the locations you have and the types of kind of experiences you craft. And I'm just curious because you've talked a lot about sort of personalization. I'm curious about not to get your strategy, but I'm interested to learn more about how you and your team approach the process of crafting these more bespoke journeys because they're quite unique.
Going back to what I said at the start, when we started the company, it was about we wanted to build a company based on the fulfillment of emotional needs. Our goal as a company, as the brand, is both yes, be client centric in the sense that we listen to what people want to do and we'll create based on that, but also it's to lead and to inspire them. And I think as a brand, I thought our belief was and still is that the way we can win customers and keep customers is also to establish and shape real authority. So that comes from demonstrating our ideas and to inspire them. So in terms of how we create, we have a central product team who work very closely with our Markham's team, where we are every year looking at parts of the world that we go to, but also what we think our customers are wanting. So we'll be creating trips to inspire, which will have a steady stream of pushing us out through our site and through our commerce channels. And then we also, people can come to our site or find us through, which means they do, and they might see something and say, hey, like, I really like the look of that specific trip and I want to take that trip. Or they'll say, hey, I like the look of that trip, but I want to tweak it, or I just want to feel like this, guys, and where should I go? And then we'll start creating that. So that will mean they'll be then introduced to a travel expert who is a specialist in the area or the type of travel they want to do. And then we will listen to what they want to do or what they've seen that we do. And then we'll craft a whole series of suggestions that they then see and come back to us, and we start piecing it together and they book it all through us. I think alongside that, so that's what I'd call that approach, seeing the side, getting in touch is our business as usual. But alongside that, every kind of year, 18 months, we launched what we call like a marquee product line. So we look at how people are traveling, or rather how we're thinking about ways you could travel that perhaps aren't being done or perhaps people aren't connected to in a way. And so we've, over the years, we've launched things like there's a service we have called Get Lost, which is where we literally take people and they are lost and explore their way out of that. We've launched very specific children-focused products like one called Take Me on a Story, where we've taken classic children's literature and turned those into trips. We launched a really alternative take on private group travel last year called See You in the Moment, where it's about bringing people together for a specific moment in time, but all the travel before and after is done in an individual sense. So you don't have the pains of group travel that we've all come across. And many more like this. But when we launch every 18 months or so, firstly, it provokes interest and people say, wow, that's a really interesting way of traveling. I actually like to use that service. Secondly, it, I think, reinforces in our clients' eyes, Black Tomato they're curious, I'm trying to sound modest because I don't like to say this, but I think we're quite innovative in terms of how we're approaching. Yeah. And it pulls people into our world and says, actually, I'm just interested in maybe traveling with Black Tomato. It might not be for that specific product per se, but I like the way they talk or they think, and I'll go and use them for perhaps my other travel plans that I've already had in my head, but that I was going to take elsewhere, I was going to do myself, but I'll use them for it. So we often compare that to a couture side from fashion brands. They'll create something that brings the eyeballs on, and you might have a limited range of those or a limited number sold, but it really builds brand awareness and builds it out. So we have an internal innovation council who meet every 2 months, and their remit is to be constantly looking at opportunities for new products like these services and assessing old ones and looking at trends both in and outside the travel industry. And we pull those in. So we have some, if you like, multiple opportunities for people to engage and travel with the company. And it's making it as easy for people to find out what their vibe is for what they want to do. And then that comes into the travel experts, and then we start crafting the perfect trip.
You mentioned your Get Lost trips, which I remember hearing about this before. I'm just curious about those. Like, how do those adventures tap into what today's luxury travelers are seeking, and what was the inspiration behind those?
It's been a really interesting and really actually wonderful product to deliver. It was an idea I'd had many years ago, which was it feels like our lives are becoming increasingly easy. They're not, they're more difficult in many other ways, but we live in this world where everything is actually available at the touch of a button. And so our expectations of being able to have everything when we want it is building. And actually, if you go back in years, decades, hundreds of years in travel, there was this sense of you would earn the right to have this experience, or you have these experiences where you feel that you've really achieved something or worked hard for, and that actually gave you more satisfaction. And so the idea was, could we create an offering where people would have to, and we call it get lost, so we'd take them to a place where they didn't know where they were going. They could choose what environment they wanted to get lost in, or they could choose just for us to do everything. And they'd be given some training, and then they'd be told that they had to explore their way out of this environment. And there'd be guides who could see the all the time. They couldn't see the guides. They can't see the guides, but so they're in this environment, they're exploring their way out of it. But at the end of it, there is this really incredible, whether it's a luxury camp or a property you get to where you've worked hard for this environment, and then you get to earn the right to go into this amazing place. And as that idea evolved, we started seeing all these sort of almost like additional benefits of what Get Lost was bringing. So as well as my thing had always been, yes, it's a physical exploration, but actually it's a mental exploration as well. Because when you're in that Get Lost experience, you are so focused on being in that moment that everything else, all the stresses, say the mental stress you might have at home and with work, they fall away because you can't not think about what you're doing there in that moment to find a way out of these environments. So then it started becoming actually more than just, here's a great kind of physical, intrepid trip to do. It actually started taking on a form of almost like wellness, which was actually for a lot of our clients who might be in very demanding jobs, have very busy work lives or family lives, relaxation is actually a distraction. If you go to sit on a beach, I'm like this. If I go and sit on a beach and I'm just, as much as I do love beach and certainly the ocean, after a while, my mind will just drift to work, or I'll be wanting to pick up my mobile handset and look at emails. And that doesn't really relax me because it's still there. If I'm stood in the middle of a glacier in the north of Iceland and I've got to get across there, all that other stuff becomes totally like periphery to me. And actually, I then become more relaxed because it's impossible to think about that stuff. So it's led to really interesting outcomes of people who've taken it. So I think when we originally conceived it, you might have thought, well, it's just for people who have this real appetite for extreme adventure. And that you can scale the level of extremity of it, but actually the consumer set that has been using it has threaded a whole host of different types. You've had individuals doing it, which was one of the initial kind of beliefs of what would happen, to couples doing it. We've had families do it together where they've been trekking for days, where they've really bonded and connected and by being lost together, but then finding their ways out of it and also finding connections between themselves. And we've had people do it to find a reset of themselves who've done these journeys and then come back, and that reset and that experiences then played its way into career choices they make or lifestyle decisions they've taken. So it's taken on this whole greater level of output than I think we'd anticipated. I think we saw the potential, but it's a gift that keeps on giving in terms of the kind of experiences that people are having, and ultimately the feedback we're getting from what it delivered for them.
We're all so hooked up to technology. I think the sort of extreme analog nature of those can't help.
Everyone talks about the digital detox need. I think there was a trend that's been around for the last 5-10 years, but increasingly we are seeing not just for things like Get Lost, but other trips people are taking where they're looking just to really slow down, just things that are far more elemental in their nature, about like reconnecting with almost the environment in ways that just take you deeper into these places. And part of that is a reaction, albeit possibly subconscious reaction, to the digital world that we're wrapped in, that brings us so many benefits in terms of ease and connectivity, but also takes us away from perhaps what some of the very necessary spaces our minds need to have when we're not connected that way. And these trips that we're creating and also the requests we're getting are definitely speaking to that need growing. And that's an interesting one that I think will only keep growing.
I think the links between a lot of the experiences you're talking about and wellness are very interesting. And you see a lot of luxury hotel chains literally having spas and yoga retreats and things like that kind of within their space. How do you, I mean, you talked a little bit about this, but I'm just curious on how you frame what you're doing in terms of this sort of wellness, I don't know, return to the fundamentals of humanism and all of that. But like, how do you try to get people to focus on the fundamentals more?
It's interesting, wellness, because it's such a broad spectrum. We talk about this often. I think it's the World Health Organization. So their definition of wellness is like complete physical, social, and mental well-being. That's a big ask, right? But when you see some hotels who say, hey, we're all about wellness, and they basically just converted a basement broom cupboard into a kind of a small little kind of massage place with a couple of tables, it's like, well, what does that mean? Is that really wellness? So I think for us, you can't be everything to everyone. And we don't actually have like within our site, here's our wellness, site, because actually I think
Yeah.
wellness is something that can pervade through all trips you're taking. So it's actually just understanding what it is someone's looking for and how can we actually help them achieve that. And so some of it will be, you get people that are burnt out and actually just need a reset or need like general, like just proper escape and tranquility. There's a growing trend that we've been behind for a while, which is about finding opportunities for complete silence. It's very rare to get genuine silence. It's actually quite discombobulating for people when you go somewhere, and because normally even when we think we're somewhere quiet, we're surrounded by white noise. And so for us, it's looking at what can we deliver for people, but also what are they looking for? And then connecting them to experiences, a way of traveling that we think will give that to them. And we do a lot around, like I say, this tranquility. There are some people where, their relationship with food and stuff like that's really important, and we'll build that out. We have a service called Bring It Back that we launched probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I've been like just spending a lot of time like looking at the applicability of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs to travel. And actually when you started looking at getting to the top of that hierarchy and saying self-actualization is where you find it's all the value, you recognize the value you have in yourself. You're not dependent on others, but how can you actually improve yourself? We started looking at the fundamental human building blocks we may all have that sometimes we have questions about, but we don't necessarily get the answers to. It was like, if I really want to get a better fix on, say, my relationship with health or something about with family dynamics or love or work, sometimes actually travel can be a really great vehicle for helping answer some of these questions out on a day-to-day basis. At home, we don't have the time for, perhaps the inspiration for. We started looking at where are there perhaps interesting communities or places that have a really interesting relationship with some of these key human building blocks, and actually helping you understand those better by spending time in those communities could be interesting. You might not be necessarily a take you agree with, but at least it'll challenge your view on it. And by doing that, it's not just what you do when you're there, but you then bring that thinking back home into your life. And so we've worked with tribes in Mongolia, have a really interesting take on family. We work with entrepreneurs in Iceland who can really help you reflect on how you should be thinking about business. We work with people in India about relationships with love. So there's a real, and all these things touch the wellness spectrum. So it's just about actually helping people find their place on it. And there's still like absolutely amazing space in our world for fantastic spas and retreats. Absolutely that. But I think it's, yeah, again, it's a very personal need for wellness. I think the first thing you need to start up when you're talking to people is, well, what does wellness mean to you? And this is what we can do. And perhaps we can help you facilitate some of your desires for what you want to achieve with it.
I love your customer-centric approach to everything. I'm a content strategist, so I'm going to ask about content from two
Mhm.
angles. I'm curious about, because you're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all of this, and I have sort of two questions in terms of how you craft the experiences that you do. One is from customer needs perspective. How do you determine what people need and reverse that back to build experiences? What sort of data do you use? What sort of I'm assuming a lot of what you're talking about is just built through your own experiences and exploring these places and not through the traditional design of let's build personas and do UX journeys. And that's my world of enterprise content strategy. But I think there are things that you can do in that sort of ideation and modeling versus the actual data. What types of customer data you study and how do you use that to drive better kind of
Yeah.
decision making for
We want to understand as much as we can about our customers as possible, because we have to know as much about our customers almost as we do about our destinations, because we ultimately are matching them. So you can get the situation where you might have a destination or experience specialist, but if you don't really understand what's making that customer tick, what they're really looking for, understand their lifestyle or their life, you're never going to get the perfect synergy. And so you can have two things you think will match, but if you don't understand either as well. So if we put kind of customer centricity and the psychology of customers right at the top of our kind of focus. So with that in mind, like we do have a lot of customer data points that we pull in terms of understanding our customers that we can analyze and we can look for trends in and opportunities within. The UX is everything for us. We have a big focus team on that. We're always looking at kind of mapping that journey or where there might be pain points in that or how can we do things better. But overlaying all of that is also confidence to ideate, even if sometimes you don't have the data, but it's based on gut feel, it's based on all these other things that are coming in that you can validate by doing some research, whether it's this stuff supports this theory, but where we are driving some of that thinking ourselves to say, we actually think, because part of our thing as a brand is to be a leader, we think actually this approach is going to challenge or actually present new opportunities to the customer they haven't even been thinking about. And so we have both, and actually quite often they do connect. Back in the day when you're a real starter, we didn't have all that stuff. That was way more kind of finger in the air, I think it'll work. And largely it has them, but the perfect thing is where we we're leading with the Innovation Council to create ideas, but that will be informed by our own thinking, but also taking evidence of we're seeing some interest in this. Sometimes we might do something we haven't seen interest in it yet, but that's because no one's introduced something to the customer in that way. And that's where it's a bigger leap of faith, but it's still based on 20 years of, I can see where things are moving. But then we're also looking at customer data for trends and opportunities in terms of what people are saying. And so whether that's from their post-trip questionnaires, whether that's the regular feedback sessions they have with their travel experts, whether that's the way we're going to capture information about people engaging with certain types of content that we're putting out on social or to our other digital channels. So I'm basically describing a bit of a melee, if you like, of different data points, insights, thinking that combined allows us to have the greatest confidence in terms of what we're producing. But sometimes the most original ideas are the riskiest ones because they're original because it hasn't really been done before. But we also in the company, we run on 3 values. Those are being humble, thoughtful, and curious. And being humble also means that you might not always get things right, but that's okay. And we encourage people in the company to suggest ideas that we'll try, because that's the only way sometimes you can move ahead, by being willing to fail or willing to accept that you can't data engineer everything to the nth degree. If you want to do something that's new, you can certainly take supporting strands of that data to validate certain parts of an idea. But sometimes the biggest or boldest, bravest ideas aren't always, substantiated by reams of data, because if they were, they'd have probably been done already. But we place a lot of emphasis on getting as much information we can about the customer as possible.
And data can only get you so far in terms of human experience anyways, but I always like to ask because I think it's how you find out who your customers are, what their expectations are from you, and what types of things they need.
I think it's so important. I think as Black to Art has grown, I think lots of customers have grown with us, but we've also brought new customers in who either weren't aware of us or sort of like, okay, no, I understand Black Tomato. And I think in the early days, and I've seen there's other businesses that people I know, things have done, it's quite easy to create in your head, this is what a customer is. And you just keep going and you'll be getting the sales in, but you're probably not drilling in. And actually, it's only when you really start digging into it, then to understand exactly who it is, that you almost work out almost what you've given birth to. And so, and sometimes I've seen it in occasions where it's misaligned, but then when you work it out, it's okay, why is it misaligned? Should we be doing something to engage more of them? Or actually, is there another market we're missing who we could bring into this? So yeah, the more information, the better, but then understanding them. And also it's quite exciting when you can help guide and lead them as well, which is a privileged position to be in when you can get to that point. And I'm not saying we're there entirely, but it's been nice to see when we have launched things that are seemingly new or not being done in that way, that we've had the response we've had.
And that was a perfectly send off for my next question, which is so I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier, talking about this idea we have of content being a physical thing. So my agency takes a very holistic approach to content. For us, content is anywhere your target audiences encounter your brand messaging. We're really trying to counter this sort of very traditional broadcast approach to content everywhere, which is brands just telling people stuff and say buy this type of thing. And that the key drives better customer service, both at in-person touch points and even digital ones, is this sort of idea of directional guided content, but also the right content for the right people. It's not just a marketing thing. It's also ensuring that people within journeys have the information they need to get their questions answered and things like that. I had a separate question about storytelling, but I'm just curious for you guys, at least in the book I'm writing, you're a very content first kind of operation in terms of you drive your marketing through content, but you're trying to drive this sort of sense of physical experiences where we take care of everything, but it's also this process of self-discovery. How do you use content to convey your brand, but also the unique stories behind the experiences you're building?
Yeah, content is everything for us. I think we built our business on content, but the key part of content, you'll agree, I think, is it's about the message within that content. I think so many people just say we just push this content out and here are your channels, and that's a given. Everyone knows the channels, like most channels you can, but it's what are we saying and what message we're trying to get out. And ultimately, we have this thing we talk about intent. What's the fuel that you're putting into the content that's going to actually stand it apart? And so we're always looking for ways to tell stories about key touch points of what the company offers, whether it is the service or then the experience in the place or the characters you'll find. And then it's actually going further and saying, what is it that gives you cut through around even some of those actual defined areas? Because a lot of companies will talk about our service is this, or you can go and do this, and how do you stand apart? And then it's looking at storytelling techniques. We're actually putting out like quite a random detail that might seem innocuous to most people, but then actually around it you can build a really interesting story, and that allows you to differentiate yourself. And then adapting messaging to different formats and looking at everywhere we go, but how we approach these places, to where are the points, where are the opportunities within these places and all these experiences to tell interesting stories. And so we then behind that have a really fantastic content team, a very clear content plan that is mapped, but allows for us to be reactive and pick up on opportunity. But all the time we're going through it, we're very stringent on our guidelines in terms of, does it fit the brand? Does it have the right tone? Is it still delivering on what our objectives are for what we're trying to achieve? So we have the right framework, but I also like allowing people to be spontaneous within it. I think problem with content, I wouldn't say for us, because sometimes it can be so over engineered or so thought about and pulled apart and sat upon and edited and cut and polished forever, that by the time you actually get something out, like you've missed the opportunity or something's gone. And understanding actually how consumers are consuming content is shifting as well, and expectations on certain channels are very different to other channels. So we spent a lot of time on it, but I think when we started the company, the opportunity to create content was not nearly as easy or plentiful as it is now. So that's a great thing to have. But then it's about the quality of the people you've got who are thinking about the content and putting it together, but also their attitude in terms of being dynamic, looking for opportunities and being progressive when it works. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but I love it. And it's probably one of our the greatest joys I have in terms of what we do at Black Tomato is the kind of the storytelling approach, whether it's a brand film or whether it's a new insight into a place, or whether it's a service that we do, but from a different angle. And I think that has certainly within our competitive set in some luxury travel. Again, I do say this modestly, and I'm trying to sound impartial. Obviously, I'm not. I do think it has stood us apart or helped us to stand apart over the years because we know how important it is, and we place great emphasis on getting that right.
I would be doing my literature PhD a disservice if I did not ask, how do you use narrative to drive storytelling in physical spaces as opposed to digital ones? It's a different concept than digital, and it can be more challenging.
I think that's one of the challenges. I think arguably it's easier to conceive a storytelling approach to content and create that in a studio, then push it out there. But then if that is tied very specific to the experience you're having, that has to flow through seamlessly. So if you're talking about recreating an Alice in Wonderland experience of children or Journey to the Center of the Earth, it has to flow that into the physical experience. So that means all the people involved in that physical experience are fully bought into the story or know how it's going to flow through. So that's both collateral and touch points you're there, it's guards you're using, it's the moments you're creating that are setting up, so it runs seamlessly through it. There's also elements of it. So that's one thing about very specific storytelling attachments to it. But then there's other aspects of just, let's say, more theoretical storytelling techniques. So Get Lost is very akin to the hero's journey kind of approach, which is there's a challenge, there's some ups and downs, and then you finish with this triumphant end. And we're always thinking about that in terms of when people are taking their trips. Now, someone's saying, look, I just want to go away for a long weekend and totally relax and clear my mind in this, remote part of the Alps. Now, do we have to build a whole story around that? No, we don't. But if we know what's important to that person, or as we've created that experience, we'll also know there are moments and touch points within that experience to kind of drop them a note or make sure there's a moment of surprise and delight there, or at the end we'll do this. So it's not necessarily a classic story per se, but we have thought about the customer's almost like emotional narrative that they're going to be on that trip, so that where we can make that connection or give something really distinctive as a takeaway, we'll do that. So yeah, that's actually been built into the company. And I think our travel experts and our product people, it's almost instinctive and second nature now. So, when we look at trips we've created, or when I can see what people are taking, I can see clear moments of where the conversations they've had with the customers in the build up to it are manifesting themselves physically in the things they're doing. And that we see in the feedback is very powerful to people, because I say, I was talking about this being important to me. Clearly I can see what you've done here and how that happened and how that really more than ticked the box. It actually gave me a feeling I've never experienced before. So yeah, it's second nature, but it's become second nature based on a lot of work and a lot of training and repetition and reminding of the importance of those feelings we're creating and connecting those also to what's been sold and marketed beforehand.
The content starter is just very happy. I'm actually also curious just about the sort of technology side of things, because I know that you don't just go in and handwrite everything by quill pen. So I'm just wondering, what role does technology play in complementing the immersive experiences you design?
It's important, like what we're creating, we have to make it accessible and easy. And we use, whether it's people like using our Black Tomato app for us to push stuff through there, or using technology in the right way to enhance the physical experience when you're there. I think it's been much talked about and will be constantly discussed in review, but the role of technology in the physical experience is something that is always going to be carefully looked at. And I see the best of it, the worst of it. I think sometimes, nothing frustrates me more than the hotels that kind of decided that everything you do in that hotel room is going to be done on a pad. Sometimes it's deeply frustrating. I don't want to have to spend 5 minutes working, I have to turn my lights off on an iPad, but I'm trying to go to bed, and equally talking to someone. So even because so much of the technology that's brought in, people think this will make everything easy, and it's actually often it doesn't. People want simplicity, but also sometimes it can actually detract from human experience. So we look at how technology can help elevate the experience, but never at the expense of taking people away from a kind of in the moment, face to face, connecting with a community or culture experience. Because for us, that's what it's all about. It might be sounding slightly romantic about this, but for me, travel's always been about the opportunity to open your mind by being exposed to other cultures or people, viewpoints or mindsets or takes. And if you often say you can get some of these people push these handheld guides on your iPhone, or you can walk through a city and you have augmented reality and it's telling you everything you need to see. And I said, I actually find it quite depressing that you could spend like 48 hours in a city and ultimately be told you don't have to talk to anyone because this guide's going to tell you everything. So one of the joys I personally is travel brings you into other people's worlds and you learn from them, you take that back. So we always try and walk the right line between how we bring technology into our experiences. But yeah, there's definitely reams and reams of moments where technology brings efficiencies and can elevate the experience, certainly not detract from it. But we always look at that very carefully.
That personally resonates with me. I'm currently very irritated at Disney over forcing you to use their My Experience app for literally everything, and it does not work. And the UX is terrible. And I think it detracts from the experience. My son is 13, and we're now gonna start taking him to Europe and trying to do more just experiences because I'm done.
There's in some hotel groups, I know that they've spent probably millions on some of their apps, but the UX is terrible. It actually detracts from the experience, and who position themselves as being at the sort of the pinnacle of high service. And this has been not just dreamt up. Obviously, it's been agreed upon in the boardroom. The theory will be great. The agency, whoever you're using, would have done it all on there. But sometimes you look at this thing and go, God, this is just been a massive waste of money because it's actually making my experience worse. So you think about the money someone spent on this, the time that's gone into this, to ultimately even maybe detract from it. That's not to say that's technology per se, but some of the roads people go down and some of this technology, it just feels it's so blinkered, or they always get caught up in its own world and they just think about it themselves rather than actually let's take a step back. What would this really do for the customer? And if it's not perfect, does this not just keep it as it is? Does it actually make it worse? And sadly, that does happen. And yeah, I'm sure some digital agencies are laughing all the way to the bank with it, but it doesn't necessarily help keep
Yeah.
the customer experience.
It's, as you said, it's really sad to be in a place that previously, just an example of Disney or Travel Anywhere, where you're supposed to be there experiencing, enjoying the destination, and you're on your phone the whole time because it's the only way you can actually get around. And it's very sad.
Yeah, exactly.
And just as a final question, I'm just curious for you, since you're on the cutting edge of a lot of this. In your opinion, what trends or innovations do you think will shape the future of luxury travel?
Yeah, it's a good question. So many. I think at the moment, one thing we are seeing is I think there's been an increase in this kind of not reaction to, but this new travel. If the notion that often travel is an antidote to the day to day, I think these opportunities to travel slower and more deeper into places where you are disconnecting or having a more elemental connection to places, I think is going to increase. You're seeing that manifest itself even in some. You look at the number of investments that have been made into train travel or into kind of some of these super ships. I wouldn't call them cruises, but like where people are saying actually there's this almost like nostalgia. And I think that focus on it's not about charging around and ticking the box or taking the picture for the social media platform. It's actually about the luxuries actually in forging connections, relationships in these places that you're getting to that perhaps few others have or can get into or have that access. So I think that's going to be, even looking at like, there's lots of new, people they're rolling out these sort of blimp travel ones up to the Arctic. You're looking at space travel seems weird to talk about it in that regard, but there's almost like the elemental nature of that. And I think there'll be, even looking at some hotels that move into more stripped back, pared back, in situ, forget about having to connect to everything the whole time. And then I think I could talk all day about different trends here, but just the other one I'd say at the moment is we touched upon a little bit at the moment, that around like the wellness thing. I think there's going to be increasing focus on some of these core building blocks that are really important to our human selves, but not from a kind of holistic, this is going to do everything, but more of a kind of, I really want to go and work on my sleep, but do it in a way that doesn't feel perhaps like as medicinal or mechanical as it is at the moment, but just whether it's that sleep or what silence can bring to you or how you think about eating. So I just think stuff that's perhaps day to day you've been thinking about fixing, but you wouldn't necessarily connect to a luxury travel experience. I think we're going to see really interesting and just really appealing ways of going and bettering yourself in these areas, but not in a kind of, I'm going off on this kind of fix me trip, but I'm having an amazing experience. And I'm also working on something that I know is going to pay back to you loads at home. So you're blending these worlds together and having a great time in one and then helping you back in the other. So I think that's just another area I think we're going to see more work in. But at the moment, those are things that are kind of pushing my buttons, but we'll see. It'll probably change by next week, but there's always lots going.
Absolutely does. That's how trends go. Thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much, Jessica. It's been great to be on.
Thank you for joining us for another great discussion as part of FSW Conversations. For deeper analysis and insights, please visit Fashion Strategy Weekly at fashionstrategyweekly.com, a media publication of strategy agency It's a Working Title. For questions, comments, and concerns, please reach out to our media team at info@itsworkingtitle.com. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms.